What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Flex Podcast. I am your host, Chris Raybond, joined by one of the top rankers in the game, and Sean Kerner. And today we are going to talk top 50, the first 4 rounds of your fantasy draft, maybe 5 if you play in a 10-teamer. So we'll just kind of go through our strategy, go through all the players who we're targeting, who we're fading, and kind of talk through that. Sean, you ready to do this?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. And before we get into it, just make sure you guys, if you enjoy the pod, be sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple. We choose our favorite 5-star review each and every week. And we award you a free year of Action Pro. So you get a rankings, projections, all that good stuff. So be sure to give a 5-star if you enjoy the pod. Let's jump into this top 50 for 2022. And I want to start it off by just kind of asking you, Sean, what's kind of your general early round strategy? I know we don't like to go into the draft, nothing rigid or anything like that, but just what's been happening generally as you kind of go through the first 4 or 5 rounds?
Yeah. So overall, it's pretty straightforward. I'm not making any, crazy picks or anything like that, but I have noticed that I tend to favor drafting wide receiver earlier than most people. That jives with my overall strategy of, in the mid to late rounds, I am very confident in my ability to kind of stash a bunch of high upside running backs. Even in the season, you're going to have opportunities to potentially add, an RB2, sometimes an RB1. You just don't have that luxury when it comes to wide receivers. So I would say my draft strategy this year specifically has been drafting wide receivers a bit early. And then also just when it comes to the first few rounds, I'm not a fan of taking on risk. So we'll get to him, but a guy like Alvin Kamara does carry some risk. So players like that or anybody dealing with an injury, I tend to shy away from. I think the early rounds you talk about all the time, you're just taking high floor guys, and then you kind of take your swings later in the draft. So when it comes to the early rounds, I'm fairly conservative.
Yeah, and to your point on the wide receivers, I feel the same way, and I would include the tight ends in that as
Yeah.
well. Kelsey, Andrews, especially because, like you said, you're just not going to be able to replace that production later in the draft or on the waiver wire. So there's only so many opportunities you get to get a Cooper Kupp, a Jamar Chase, a Travis Kelsey,
Yep.
guys like that, where, like you said, let's say a Dalvin Cook or Najee Harris goes down. It's possible that their backup comes in and performs similarly to them, in that role. So, and on top of that, and we talk about this too, running backs miss more games than wide receivers. And it was so much more pronounced now that we had the 17-game season. So that's
Yep.
also something I'm monitoring. But I think I mentioned on this pod that running backs actually missed a median of 3 games last year, where receivers stayed at 1.
Yep.
So now you're talking about 16 to 14. That's a 2-game difference. So by drafting, let's say, 3 running backs in the first 3 rounds or 3 in the first 4 or 5, you're essentially limiting the amount of games that your team is projected for at the most important part in the draft. Like, you usually need 1 running back. I'm not saying go 0
Right.
running RB, but you kind of want to mitigate that risk by just smashing the pass catchers. And of course, waiting on quarterback. I feel like it's like we don't even bring that up anymore. But yeah, I'm not taking a quarterback either. No one before Jalen Hurts for me in these drafts. But let's just run down the ADP. And so start with Jonathan Taylor. Any concerns? I know Frank Reich came out and said, we might not use him quite as much. I do think Nyheim Hines gets a little more work. I don't necessarily think it's at the expense of Taylor in terms of the fantasy production. Are you still taking him number 1?
Yes, absolutely. And, to be fair, he's not a lock to finish as the top running back or the most valuable player in fantasy, but he certainly is the heavy favorite. So that's why I'm still taking him number 1. There's no reason to be concerned. Like you said, they might throw a bit more this year. I already anticipate that anyway. They led the league in time of possession with the lead last year, and I don't think that's going to stay the same. So they should throw more this year, but Jonathan Taylor is as durable as it gets. I guess he's never missed a practice or a game at any point in his career. So yeah, there's really no reason for concern with Taylor.
Yeah, I agree. Although I do think the Colts will have a healthy share of leads. I mean, they did upgrade a
Oh, right,
quarterback,
yeah.
so
But lead the league
there
in
is
time
that.
possession with the lead for a second season in a row is just unlikely. I would bet against it.
Absolutely, of course. Austin Eckler is at number 2, and we talked about him before. I think he certainly understand why you would take him at number 2, but I do think there's a little bit of kind of variance there where he's a guy who's going to more likely get you 10, 11, 12 carries, a bunch of catches. So I just think he's a guy that, like, he's not a lock for number 2, at least on my board. What about you?
Yeah, it's a bit rich. And, the concern with him is he doesn't really see a full workload. But, last season especially, he dominated in the touches that matter, which are receptions and goal line work. I could see them shining away from using him at the goal line as much this season. They just drafted, Isaiah.
Oh, stop this. Why do we do this every year with these guys? These rookies aren't getting Austin Eckler's like the strongest player in the league. He's getting these carries, man.
Joshua Kelly, Spiller, and Roundtree are just, 2-down thumpers. So the fact that they already limit Eckler when it comes to just carries in general means there might be some times they limit him at the goal line. That's all I'm saying. Either way, even if he has the same role as last season, I would still take CMC here or Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I was, listen, I love Eckler, but I've been, you could get Eckler end of the first round, second round, these last couple of years. I always feel like you never want to be a year too late. And I think Eckler will be fine, but I do think he's not a lock for that number 2 spot. You mentioned Christian McCaffrey. I think it's tough for people to kind of spend the pick on him because they look at his season stats if they click on him, and there's not many games played there. There's not many game logs these last couple of years. I know you kind of you're all about the odds. So what do you think about McCaffrey's likelihood of being injured due to what's happened in the past?
It's definitely a concern. I would understand why people would hesitate taking him number 2 or number 3 overall. But all signs seem to point him being 100% healthy into the season. So the odds of him missing time should be about the same as all the other backs in this range. I don't think you can really say that, he's more injury prone than anybody else at this point. He's still in the prime of his career. So if you've been burned on him 1 or 2 seasons, the past couple seasons, I would get the hesitation. But fortunately, I haven't really had much of Christian McCaffrey the past 2 seasons. That's maybe that's why I'm bullish on him. But going into the season, his odds have to be similar to everybody else in missing games. So that's why I think he should go number 2 overall. Or like I said, I'm willing to take a wide receiver like Cooper Kupp at number 2 overall.
Yeah, and obviously, I think full PPR probably, kind of maximizes that CMC value as well as it does Eckler. But yeah, I think Kupp at this point, you could make the argument to take him number 1 overall. And it's he's going number 4, but what is kind of the case for you in terms of taking him over Eckler, over McCaffrey, maybe even Taylor?
It's just wide receiver is a position you don't want to be facing an uphill battle in season. So I just love having my starting unit be elite wide receivers, because if you think about it, you're not really going to find a wide receiver 1 or even a wide receiver 2 on the waiver wire in season. Rashad Penny, for example, was the RB2 for the final 5 weeks of the season, and he was widely available in week 13. That's just how the running back position is. So while running back is very important, it's the most important position in fantasy, it's kind of because the position is so fragile. So that gives you massive opportunity in the later rounds or even the waiver wire in season. That makes running back a position you could strike gold at any point in the draft. So that's why, taking Cooper Kupp, like you said, even number 1 overall, isn't that crazy? Because I think it is valuable just locking in, elite wide receivers early on. And then, running back, I load up at the position in the mid to late rounds anyway. Usually I can come away with, a couple RB1s or RB2s anyways, even if I punt the position altogether. So while I don't subscribe to 0 RB, I just think a guy like Cooper Kupp, especially early in the draft, makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and the numbers kind of bear that out if you're factoring these missed games into the projections, because even a guy like Taylor, I'm projecting with 2 missed games, even though he hasn't missed a game. We saw what happened with Henry. We saw what happened with McCaffrey. It's still an increased risk. So that the numbers just kind of bear it out. Like there's nothing kind of stopping you. And then on the other hand, the odds of, even though we keep hearing about Matthew Stafford's got some elbow issues, the odds of Matthew Stafford like missing a significant amount of games are still not that much higher than any other quarterback. Even, I know he's kind of is starting the year with the injury, but it's just more so something he's kind of has to deal with. So I've heard the concerns there. I'm not really buying it too much, but I guess that would be why people may shy away as well. But I like Kupp. I think Kupp should be going, as high as you want to take him.
Yeah, that is a fair point. That's the one thing about wide receiver where there is potential downside is they are attached to their starting quarterback. So Cooper Kupp, if Stafford were to miss time, I mean Cooper Kupp with John Wolford might be in the wide receiver 2 range. I mean, honestly, he might take that much of a dip. Whereas, a team like the Ravens, they have survived. The offense has gotten actually better when Tyler Huntley's under center. So I do factor that in when I evaluate receivers. But like you said, the odds of Stafford missing time are very low. So it's not something I really weight too heavily when it comes to Kupp. But that is something that you kind of have to factor in when drafting wide receivers.
Yeah. And I should mention, Kupp, Chase, Jefferson, you could get those guys not in the first round last year. So there is, we're not going into the draft saying, you must take a wide receiver, forget about running back. We're just kind of pointing out, the kind of demand and how we're kind of going through this. Derrick Henry's at number 5. I mean, for a guy this beastly, I feel like there's not been a lot of talk about Henry. I mean, this guy could easily finish as the top player overall in fantasy. He was getting 27 carries a game last year before he went down. And I don't looking at this Titan squad, I don't see any way he doesn't again.
Yeah, especially after getting rid of AJ Brown. They're almost going to have to run the shit out of the ball. So yeah, I do like Henry. I am a bit worried. He is, 28 years old now. And he's taken a massive beating in his career. If there's any back that can probably eke out one more elite season at 28, it's probably Derrick Henry. So I can see why you would draft him number 5 overall. I think he has a very high floor. And like I said, when it comes to these first few rounds, I do value that. So I think he's still worth, number 5, number 6 overall pick for sure.
Yeah, it's and he's a guy, it also depends on your scoring system because I think, full PPR, that's where you're pushing Eckler and McCaffrey further up and, maybe Kupp a little higher, half PPR. And you think about Henry a little more obviously standard leagues. Yep. He's a smash. Justin Jefferson, I mean, this guy is just a monster. He might be the new Cooper Kupp. So he's a guy, I mean, I could argue taking him as high as number 1 overall too, because Kevin O'Connell, the OC with the Rams last year, now the head coach for the Vikings. This is the first time that Jefferson is not going to have had, a Mike Zimmer, who's essentially like the Pete Carroll of the Vikings. Like he just wanted the team to be run heavy and probably kind of messed with Cousins' head as well. So how high are you taking JJ?
I would consider him number 5 overall, number 4. Like you said, if somebody takes him number 1 overall, it's kind of a reach, but it kind of isn't. Like it's not a bad pick because he's not going to make it back to you. Yeah. So that's why, anywhere in the top 6, honestly. Ideally, I have say pick 7 overall, and he lands there. Like I would say the optimal draft is landing the 6th or 7th pick and Justin Jefferson being there, honestly. Because like you said, he's essentially going to be in the Cooper Kupp role in this offense. Justin Jefferson is arguably the best receiver in the game right now. So yeah, if you can get him number 6, number 7 overall, that is a phenomenal pick.
Yeah, I don't like being in the middle as much, and we'll talk about it only because I think it makes tight end a little harder. Like if I'm earlier, I can usually get like my choice of running back or Kupp Jefferson and still have a chance at least Andrews, where it's a little harder to do in the middle. I mean, what usually happens is then I'm not getting a running back till like the 3rd round.
That's
which
fine.
I mean, it's not as it's not terrible. But I do like being a little bit early. I think the further you go back, as is usually the case, the further your first round pick is to the back, I think it gets a little tougher. I think you're just a little more limited in how you're going to execute your strategy. And we'll get to that when we start talking about the tight ends. But I love Jefferson is the point. I think he could be this year's Cooper Kupp. Dalvin Cook, I mean, is he going to play more than 14 games?
That's the question. If he does, he's worth this draft slot. Like, he could benefit from the scheme as well. They're going to use him more in the passing game. So there's not much to hate on with Dalvin Cook. It's just, can he play more than 14 games? So it's kind of up to you if you're drafting him, if you want to take on that risk.
Yeah, like even if he does play 14, they're going to be 14 high quality games. So nothing really to talk about there. Same thing with Najee, but Jamar Chase is another guy, man. Like, just like how you can feel it coming with Justin Jefferson. I mean, Jamar Chase, I feel like looking at the board, 9 almost feels too low for Chase. This guy, I think he could lead the league in receiving yards. That's a prop. I think it's still like 10-1. It's, not a long shot, but like I think this guy, just based on his average depth of target, he's had the chemistry with Burrow going back to school. This guy he could be Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson will turn into Cooper Kupp. So I like getting Chase over Cook and Najee in my drafts.
Yeah, and you could get him with the 9th pick overall, and then a guy like Travis Kelce might make it back to round 2, or any one of these like other low end RB1s like a Camaro if you want that. Mixon, even Swift, Barkley. So yeah, having the 9th pick is also good. If you get Chase, you're gonna have some decent options in round 2 as well. But yeah, like I agree. I think you could make a case for taking Chase 7th if you want to take him over like Najee and Dalvin Cook. But yeah, the sky's the limit when it comes to Jamar Chase this season.
Yeah, again, I'm just trying to mitigate some of that missed game risk, and like I know Chase, Jefferson weren't going in the first round last year, but when you look at just look at the market for odds to lead the league in receiving. There's only a few guys I think this, like sometimes it's like wide open. And I know you had that Calvin Ridley bet one year, the Godwin bet one year. I think this year my bet is going to be Michael Pittman, nice. like 30-1. But there's kind of a teardrop in terms of the guys that truly have that, like, just, oh my God, like, we've never seen a season like this. This is Randy Moss level type of season coming. And I think Chase is, you can just see it coming. Like, it's just right in front of us.
And the fact that Devontae left Green Bay, so he left Aaron Rodgers, and the fact that Tyreek left, Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes, their, value gets a bit of a hit, whereas Jamar Chase is more of an ascending path. So he kind of benefits from those 2 stud receivers as well. And in both that, the most receiving yards market and in fantasy. So that's just another sneaky reason why I think Chase is, he should absolutely be the number 3 wide receiver, and you should absolutely consider him as soon as pick 7.
Yeah. And Devontae, don't get me wrong, he's in the running.
Yeah.
But he's usually going to average like 12 yards a catch. So it's just he's going to have to really go off, where Chase can average 19 yards a catch. He doesn't even have to do it. So that's why I love me some Chase. Mixon, not my favorite. He's kind of the end of like that like running back who you feel like could get you like 15, 20 touchdowns. Well, maybe I guess Nick Chubb, but like he feels like he's in a tier by himself. But I still like Devontae and Stephon Diggs under him. I mean, Devontae's still Devontae, the best receiver in the game, and in terms of just straight up getting open. And then Stephon Diggs, talk about a guy, like Stephon Diggs could put up a Chase like season 2. Like, he's in Buffalo. It's just him and Gabe Davis. They're gonna get a lot of love this year. So I don't mind these receivers, but I'm really starting now is like, if I'm at this point in the draft and I haven't picked yet, or I'm thinking of Travis Kelce, early second, because if you're at the back of the draft, it's going to be too early for Mark Andrews. Probably not going to get back to you. So but you want that stud tight end. So this is the part where I'm kind of going at Kelce. What about you?
Yeah, so Joe Mixon, I agree. Like, I love him this year. They might limit him in the passing game, but with this improved offensive line, you could say it's the most improved offensive line in the league. He has massive upside. You already mentioned the touchdown upside is there. The rushing upside is there. But at pick 10, you have to consider who's going to make it back to you. And if you're in a 12-team league, like both Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs probably won't make it back to you. They typically return, maybe Travis Kelce. There's a chance if you pass up on Joe Mixon, he actually makes it back to you. And if he doesn't, there's three other backs in Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift, and Saquon Barkley who have similar upside as Mixon that might make it back to you. So at that position, at number 10 overall, I'm absolutely targeting a wide receiver, whether it's Jamar Chase if he's still there, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, or like you said, even Travis Kelce, I would consider that. But I just think taking a running back at pick 10 is kind of a bad move because you can take like the guy that whoever you wanted to take there might make it back to you in round 2. So you're kind of passing up on getting one of these elite receivers and still landing one of these running backs. So that's kind of how I'm handling the 10 spot. I think Mixon there is a bit too high.
Yeah, and I would actually take that a step further. I think once you get to the back end of the draft, I think you want a wide receiver and Kelce. Yeah. And like Mixon is great, don't get me wrong, but I can probably get like James Conner like in the third or something. If like it's just at this point, I think to maximize your upside, you really want Kelce. And sometimes I'll even take Kelce in the first round because he's like if he doesn't make it back to me, I'm screwed. Whereas like I still have there's like Devontae, there's Diggs. There and like there's still a few more of those kind of top tier receivers. I'll have my choice in a second. So that's the guy I kind of target here is Travis Kelce. I think he's gonna have a monster year. Just Tyreek there. I mean, he could have a career year just based on usage because he's always had to kind of compete with Tyreek.
Yeah.
But after those guys, you got DeAndre Swift, Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones. That's the running back tier. I don't mind him, but I just feel like at this point in the draft, not necessarily like you don't necessarily have to go running back here. I think you're starting to see the pass catchers in that top tier, like they're gonna kind of run out, whereas like you're already down there in that, whatever you want to call it, tier 3 of running backs, tier 4, I don't know, whatever what you call it. But Alvin Kamara, let's talk about him. He goes right after those three. Which is understandable because next is Saquon, who everyone's probably worried about, and Javonte, who I guess people feel he's a little unproven. But we have an article. We all kind of weighed in on how we're going about Kamara's and his suspension. So where are you with that in terms of how likely you think it is? I know we've heard some report that it's maybe not likely. Now, see, I don't know what that means because it's just a reporter. So like, I can't say, oh, he has a 0 chance of suspension. So I've essentially kept it like, I think I put it at like 40% in terms of how I'm projecting it, like 40% chance that he gets the suspension.
Wow. That seems a bit high. And I'm not going to argue with that. I think that's kind of the point is we don't know. So it does look like the odds of him getting suspended this season have significantly decreased. So it makes it very tricky. And this is what I said. It's kind of up to you if you want to take on that risk or not. As I mentioned at the top, I am not taking on risk when it comes to the first few rounds. So, Kamara's going to have to be there outside of the top 20, really, for me to consider him. I'm more comfortable taking a guy like Saquon Barkley or DeAndre Swift that, I know they're going to play 17 games if they stay healthy. So I'm passing on Alvin Kamara at his current ADP. Now, if he does play all 17 games, he could crush his ADP, but I mean, he hasn't been as untouchable as he has been in years past. So, he's a player where I just don't think it's worth it. Because like you said, it could be a 40% chance he's suspended, and it would be towards the end of the season, which is the most valuable time to have a guy like Kamara. So that's why just the uncertainty, I'm staying away from still.
Yeah, and there's other risks built in. I mean, Sean Payton has moved on, so it's kind of a new. We don't know exactly. They're just some unknowns. Like I don't. At this point, I would understand why somebody would take this risk, especially if you started the draft with a wide receiver. Being able to get like a Cooper Kupp, Alvin Kamara team. That there's a lot of upside there, and you're trying to win your week, so I don't mind. But yeah, he's just a little further down on my board just because there is some uncertainty. Whatever you think it is, the point it's not 0. So
exactly.
that's what we're trying to avoid here. CeeDee Lamb goes next. Nothing really to talk about with him. But Saquon is 19. What about him? Does the risk or the perceived risk, I guess you can call it, match the reward at 19th overall?
No, I do like him here. And you remember we faded him last season because he was entering the season hurt. He was already hurt. He was going to be limited. And we didn't like his production even when he was healthy. But I think this is a fair time to take him. All signs seem to point him being 100% to begin the season. there are concerns about the offensive line, but he's a pass catching back, so I think he can overcome that quite a bit. He has literally zero competition for touches back there. Who's going to steal touches? Matt Breida. So I just like getting him at this price this year compared to last year, just because he is 100% healthy. And like I said with Christian McCaffrey, if a running back is 100% healthy, you can't really just assume they're more injury prone than other people. His in-season injury last year was a bit fluky as well. So I like getting Barkley here. He still has top 5 upside. So I think getting him at 19 overall or later is definitely worth it.
Yeah, like I have, this is essentially in terms of the running back pecking here. I mean, I do have Javonte ranked above him. So, but I tend to be just going a different way positionally at this point in the draft. If I'm 19, whether it's a 10 or a 12, if I can get Mark Andrews there, I'm usually just trying to do that because I think there's a huge drop off. And obviously, Kyle Pitts has some upside, but I think you can usually survive your draft with getting Mark Andrews at that spot. And then, you're still going to get a good player in the third. Tyreek Hill, 20. Debo's at 20. Devontae 21. Tyreek Hill, 22. Like, I mean, this is the argument for kind of taking a running back early in the first round over like a Cup or Jefferson. It's because like you can get Tyreek Hill at the end of the second. Now, I think that's too low. And also hearing that Waddle is kind of been missing a lot of practice. Like, I think Tyreek Hill is going to still be that alpha. Obviously, it's no Mahomes, but this is one of the most talented players in the league, and you're getting him 20 seconds. So I like the Tyreek spot. What about you?
Yeah, I love getting him here. And I actually mentioned in my wide receiver tiers that there's a 20 in my projected, half PPR points. There's a 21 point drop off from Tyreek to the next receiver, Mike Evans. And it takes 19 more wide receivers to see a 21 point drop off. So this is definitely at the end of a tier. So I do like getting Tyreek late. I like getting him in here. And actually every position has a massive drop off here. This is an interesting part in the draft where literally every position sees a massive drop off. So I do like the idea of getting Tyreek Hill here. And the chances of Mike Gesicki getting traded seem pretty high right now. If he's dealt, I think that's going to help Tyreek's target share even more. So there's a lot of reasons to like getting Tyreek Hill, like you said, at the end of the second round. Like, it's too good to pass up.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned it. There are some drop offs. Projection wise at this part of the draft, and so now you have to start being smart about positions and what positions are smart to target the drop offs. Obviously, we talked wide receiver, but I think the thing to avoid is, in my opinion, drafting Josh Allen here, because while there is a big drop off from him to the QB2, you could still get a Mark Andrews here. You could still get a Tyreek Hill here. You could still get a running back as well if you maybe started with a receiver and you're kind of worried about the depth there. So you're going to have usually 3 picks, by the time this tier is all said and done if you're drafting at this point. So it's one of those where I guess Allen is the guy I avoid in this spot.
Yeah, Allen's tricky because when it comes to like modeling and VBD values, like he's way up there.
Yeah.
Like I definitely have a big drop off between him and the next tier of QBs with Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray. But like you said, when it just comes to the position, the fact that you can get Jalen Hurts later on, or even Trey Lance, like if he falls outside of the top 10, just the amount of value you're going to get from that, and you can build out the other positions before then. It just makes it drafting Josh Allen this early, it doesn't make as much sense. But if anybody drafts Josh Allen 20th overall, you can't blame them. It's just based on my overall draft strategy. It doesn't jive with that. But certainly when you look at BBD values and drop offs and things like that, 20 overall does make sense for Josh Allen.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can blame them, because if they're sitting there and the team is struggling and guys are injured, and some team with like Trey Lance beating them, because it's like hopefully you can blame them. Well, so, we like the player. It's just not the. It's not an optimal fantasy strategy in a 1 quarterback league to take a quarterback early. It just, and the numbers bear it out. I have a draft strategy article up at actionnetwork.com, and I talk about how, the majority of the top 5 quarterbacks that we've seen, I went back like a decade, and the majority of top 5 quarterbacks, we see they were drafted round 6 or later. So it's middle round quarterbacks. Okay, like I don't blame you as much, but you like Josh Allen, the odds, just like you said with Taylor, like yeah, he's the favorite, but at quarterback, like if the favorite doesn't hit, there's a huge drop off because there's only one being taken here, one being taken in the next round, one or two, so you have a lot more downside just taking the position here than others. So
I will invest in Josh Allen through Gabe Davis. That's how
exactly. Exactly. So then Mark Andrews goes. Like I said, I take him a little earlier.
Could you imagine if he falls to 24?
Yeah, I mean that's his ADP. Like, not everyone is, not everyone is out there in these expert drafts, best ball drafts. In regular drafts he falls a little more. So yeah, I do think there's a drop off between him and Pitts, and obviously maybe he enters that tier, but you still have to kind of be conservative with him just because we don't know exactly how the offense is going to look. Is it going to have enough volume where we've kind of seen it with Andrews, and we've seen the upside. So I like him here. Fournette, I think he's going where he should be going. Mike Evans, AJ Brown, Keenan Allen. People are sleeping on Keenan Allen. I feel like I get him. Yeah. He's a guy who I get in like the third round. Like I love starting a draft where I get like stud running back, stud tight end, and then Keenan Allen's still my wide receiver one. I'll take that all day. Ezekiel Elliott though. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just Keenan Allen when it comes to season-long head-to-head leagues, you know exactly what you're going to get. Mm-hmm. Like he has such a high floor that does help you in head-to-head leagues because you have to remember you're just trying to beat one other team each week, not everybody. So like best ball formats, I can see kind of hesitating on Keenan Allen, but season-long head-to-head, he is a smash play. If you can get him right around like 30th overall, just can't beat that.
I don't even mind him in best ball because you're talking about Justin Herbert, who we have projected is, he's like the favorite to lead the league in touchdowns and in yards too. Right. I believe. So it's like he's still the most targeted player on that team, man.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying fade him in best ball. I'm just saying Mike Williams is absolutely a best ball specialist.
Yeah.
Whereas in season long head to head, you never know when the hell to play him. But Keenan Allen, just every week in, week out, he's going to get you 6 to 7 catches. So just in that regard, he is exceptionally good for head-to-head leagues.
And then we get to 29th, and is Ezekiel Elliott like frozen pond?
I don't consider him frozen pond. I don't think Tony Pollard will like leapfrog him when he's healthy. That's kind of how I view the frozen pond. I actually said in my running back upside piece, like the Cowboys, Browns, and Broncos backfields, it's interesting where both the starter and backup have injury upside. So if Tony Pollard were to go down, which would be very unfortunate because I have so much Tony Pollard this year, Zeke would be a low end RB1, right? Like he would see a massive workload. The Tyron Smith injury doesn't help, but I think Zeke would still push low end RB1 value. Like all those backfields, all the backup or the starters and backups have hidden upside. So I don't mind Zeke here. I rather wait and get Pollard. But I think Zeke has such a safe workload. They're paying him too much money to not give him touches that I don't consider him frozen pond. He might actually be a value in this range. I think he's a little bit too cheap this year.
Yeah, I was about to say, he could be a low-end RB1. He could be a low-end RB1 anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Our boy T. Higgins goes number 30.
Oh, yeah.
Like him. Nothing much to say. James Conner, I do like getting here as well. 31, I think he's a value. You kind of know what you're going to get. He's probably going to give you like 200 some odd carries, not many more than that, catch the ball. But I mean, he just looked amazing last year. And now he's got less competition for touches. So Cam Akers, though, I want to get your thoughts on Akers because he's going 32nd. A lot of interesting things kind of transpired with him. He comes back from the torn Achilles. He plays absolutely dreadfully. And then now all camp, we've been hearing Sean McVay's treating him and Henderson like co-RB1s. And the beat writers who have been watching the practices say they've actually been splitting reps. And so like now you're actually seeing it happen in practice and McVay is saying it. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on how exactly you're projecting the splits with him and Henderson, given, what we're hearing out of Rams camp.
Yeah, what we're hearing out of Rams camp means that Akers is definitely a frozen pond type of candidate because he doesn't have a guaranteed workload. The reason I bumped him down to like he's probably 40th overall. So I wouldn't take him this early. But the reason I still like Akers is just the Rams threw the ball inside the 5-yard line at a very high rate last year. They ranked first. I could see that regressing a bit. I could see Cam Akers easily having a 10 plus touchdown season. So I do like his upside. But like you said, there is concern when it comes to workload, and being in a true 50-50 committee with Darrell Henderson is a real possibility. So I think getting him in this range definitely gives off frozen pond vibes. And I know you like Darrell Henderson, so that, I mean, that just speaks to that situation being closer than people expected.
Yeah, and let me first of all, it's not like I like Darrell Henderson. I mean, he's great, he's cool, but he's not like one of my guys like Gabe Davis or anything. But
right.
I mean, I just always try to manage risk, and like you said it at the top. And last year I managed risk by taking guys like James Conner and Leonard Fournette, because I was getting them as like a cheaper like part of what could end up being a committee. And Jamal Williams even had a lot of value at different points in that year. Yep. So like this year, again, you're not getting another Kyle Pitts. Like if you let him pass, you're not getting another Michael Pittman.
Exactly.
So it's like Cam Akers, you might get another Cam Akers, and his name could be Darrell Henderson, and you could get him in the 9th or 10th round. So it's just managing risk. Nothing against Akers. Yeah. But I just don't like this spot for him. Matter of fact, if I would actually love Kyle Pitts here if I didn't have a tight end yet, and I'm drafting here. What are your thoughts on Pitts, real quick? Just I know you have the big drop off, but I feel like he's more likely to hit the top tier than like Kittle or Waller this year.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I think he's almost in a mini tier. He sort of had, so Kelsey and Andrews are they're tier 1. I consider them very close. And then you have the 3 tight ends a little bit farther down with Pitts, Waller, and Kittle. And I honestly think Pitts deserves his own tier, because if you think of his range of outcomes, being the greatest tight end of all time is certainly within his range of outcomes. So getting him while he's ascending in his career, he's what, only 21 years old right now. He could easily join that top tier this season. I think the only reason he wouldn't this year is because Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder will let us down. But either way, he's one of those guys where you can bank in a higher ceiling. So I would take him, a little bit earlier than I'm projecting, because his range of outcomes is a lot wider than Waller or even Kittle. So I do kind of like getting Pitts in this range if I still need a tight end.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the way I like to think about it is, again, you want to be a year early to these things, so you can kind of see this coming. And remember, like I look at Pitts kind of like he could be Mark Andrews, like a guy who puts up ridiculous numbers on a low volume pass offense, and even with Andrews, he was great last year. But remember, he really solidified himself as that, like, okay, now I'm Travis Kelce material with that 3-game stretch, week 14 to 16, where he had 11 for 115, 10 for 136, and 8 for 125 with at least one touchdown in each of those games with Huntley. And if he doesn't do that, he's probably a little closer to Pitts in ADP and overall finish. So this year, it could easily be Pitts. I mean, Drake London, we already saw him get banged up. So there could be a situation where Pitts is still that undisputed top target in Atlanta. And like you said, one of the better talents of the generation. So I would go Pitts right here, would not go Mahomes. Do like Michael Pittman, though. I mean, another guy I think people are sleeping on. I think he has an outside shot at leading the league in receiving yards. Remember, Matt Ryan, his guys are always in that running when he actually has good receivers. Julio would get crazy yardage, and then Ridley. And Pittman, we talked to Matt Harmon about him. He said he was one of the top receivers in reception perception. No issues getting open. So like Pittman. I do want to get your thoughts on Breece Hall. It's Montgomery, Justin Herbert. Mahomes is up there in that ADP range as well. Not taking quarterbacks just yet, but Breece Hall, 38th overall. We did get a report out of Jets camp that Michael Carter still, quote unquote, the RB1. We know we're gonna see a pretty big workload for Hall, but this is another one where, I mean, what are you doing with Hall at 38?
I think 38 is a bit high, and I love Breece Hall. He was by far my favorite running back from this class. He reminds me of a blend of like Joe Mixon and Kareem Hunt. I think he's going to be that good. And I kind of figured that Michael Carter is going to be an issue at least earlier in the season. But I think talent will win out. I think by the end of the season, Breece Hall will be a workhorse back. But behind this offensive line, in this offense, the upside is very limited. I think the offensive line is going to let him down a bit this season. So I think 38 is a bit too high, especially considering Michael Carter's still there. So I love the talent. This seems a bit too early for me.
And you still need touchdowns, and it's still the Jets.
Yeah,
so.
you still need touchdowns. Exactly.
Jalen Waddle apparently a little bit banged up, but at least his ADP has fallen a little bit. I still would prefer like the wide receiver ones, like Deontay, Terry McLaurin, over a Jalen Waddle. So I think this is a little too high, but and DJ Moore as well.
Yeah.
So DJ Moore is going 40th. Probably the best quarterback he's ever had. No, it's not saying much, but
Yeah.
would you take Moore over Jalen Waddle?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yep.
I think Moore is sort of at the top of this. Michael Pitten's at the top of all these guys. That was a great call earlier, especially at the most receiving yards at 30-1. But I think after Pittman, DJ Moore is the guy for me. Now, granted, he does have limited touchdown upside, but in this offense, he's going to be the undisputed number one target, whereas Jalen Waddle is going to be the number two target. So I definitely like the fact that we're getting a number one wide receiver in DJ Moore. So yeah, I would definitely take Moore over Waddle here.
Then we got Deontay Johnson. Another guy just gets open like crazy. So it'd be ideal if Pickett took over. I think they might have a higher chance of more pass volume with Pickett. I know that sounds crazy because he's a rookie, but if you're starting Mitch Trubisky, you pretty much know what kind of offense you're going to be. But if you're starting Pickett, I mean, there's that outside shot at them just, being like a 600, like Justin Herbert in year one.
Yeah.
So that's, but either way, I think Deontay's fine here. But it's another spot where if I don't have a tight end, I'm looking at George Kittle in this range. Love Terry McLaurin. Travis Etienne should be the lead back in Jacksonville. See, like Etienne, I'd rather have him over Breece Hall because, similar situation, kind of another guy looming there. Could be a bad offense, but like Etienne is like in the driver's seat. Like we know James Robinson's going to kind of start the year slow and be ramped up. So what do you think of Etienne over Breece?
Yeah, it's tricky because James Robinson, he made an amazing recovery. I thought he was going to miss, a handful of games to start the season. It looks like he might be able to play week one, so that complicates things a little bit. I still think Etienne will be the workhorse back, and love his passing usage. On a team like the Jaguars, where they're going to be trailing a lot. It's good to know that Etienne will be sort of game script proofed. So love the upside in getting Etienne here. I would probably prefer him over Breece Hall right now, but it's very close. I have like three or four backs in this range, basically tied. But I think, when it comes to the full season, I'd probably prefer Etienne.
Yeah, and I mean, and to be clear, this is more in terms of just a running back pecking order because this is part of the draft where I think you're better off drafting pass catchers. It's like because you just as much as we want those, Cooper Kupps and Justin Jeffersons early in the draft. Those you could find those guys a couple of times in these rounds last year. So what the ideal is, you get one of those guys and then you find the next one of those guys here. And you can't do that if you're just taking these running backs who probably have more downside than upside. Josh Jacobs is another one of those. I mean, in the running back rankings, I actually have him pretty much in line with this. But I know Kenyon Drake got cut, but are you still concerned with just the potential workload for Jacobs this year with the new coaching staff, or you think he was worth taking at 45?
No, I'm definitely concerned, especially since they look committed to have a James White role, whether it's Amir Abdullah or Brandon Bolden, and then Zamir White's definitely going to eat into Josh Jacobs early down work. So this could be sort of the Patriots where it's a frustrating 2 to 3 way running back committee. I think the fact that they released Kenyon Drake definitely helps Josh Jacobs. So I moved him up quite a bit. But like you mentioned, this is the range where I'm probably, targeting wide receiver. I know I keep saying that every range I'm targeting a wide receiver. I think where you were talking about like James Conner, Leonard Fournette, maybe even like Javonte Williams, that's sort of the sweet spot range for me when it comes to like when to target a running back. So I think just in this range, when it comes to these backs, like Josh Jacobs is definitely sort of like a frozen pond kind of guy. So it seems a bit early to be taken when his role seems to be pretty sandwich between, early down backs and pass catching backs, where I'm kind of shying away from him even after Kenyon Drake was, released.
Yeah, I think in a standard league, that's where you kind of maximize the upside for Jacobs, because I do like the offense.
Yeah.
I think they can. They haven't historically scored a lot of points. Have the Raiders. So this year, I think they could change that. So Jacobs could another guy get you a lot of touchdowns. I mean, there's a world where Jacobs and Joe Mixon have the same numbers. So
exactly,
it's not the worst pick. Again, like in the running back pecking order, I have Jacobs here, but I would prefer to take a wide receiver, and it's cool because looking at the rest, how this board rounds out in the top 50, there actually aren't that many wide receivers flying off the board. So you can get a Mike Williams. There's DK Metcalf there because Lamar Jackson's going at 47 and Waller at 48, Elijah Mitchell at 49. So this is where I start taking pass catchers, and then maybe I'll get my second running back, in the 6th or the 7th or something like that. But any other guys that you want to mention that you tend to get that maybe aren't ranked in that top 50?
No, I was going to elaborate on just my running back approach where, like I said, Josh Jacobs, Etienne, Breece Hall, even those guys, I'm typically fading. I'm still targeting, wide receiver or getting a tight end like, Kyle Pitts. But after the top 50, that's when I definitely target running backs, guys like AJ Dillon, Kareem Hunt. He goes way too late still. Tony Pollard. Those are my favorite running backs to draft, because they should be able to offer low end RB2 or flex value even when their starting running back is healthy, but they all have RB1 upside if the starting running back were to go down. So I just love that floor ceiling combo with those guys. And it allows me to just hammer wide receiver or tight end early in the draft. And at the end of the day, I still might end up with 2 or 3 RB1s at points during the season. So that's why I just want to clarify, like, it seems like I'm just fading running back constantly, but really, like I said, the Javonte Williams, Leonard Fournette, James Conner range is when I like to get a running back. And then after the top 50, the AJ Dillon, Kareem Hunt, Tony Pollard range is absolutely when I'm trying to target at least 2 of those backs.
Yep, because the way I kind of look at, like, when I see the draft board, I kind of look at where the drop off is just from guys that you would feel comfortable starting in week 1 at all. And there's about, give or take 40 wide receivers and maybe 38-ish running backs. Let's say 40 each. So my plan is usually by the end of the 9th round, I kind of know what I need to have. Like, I want to have a tight end and I want 4 wide receivers. I think you've spoken about this. I totally agree. I think you want 4 wide receivers. And then depending on your league, you want either 3 or 4 running backs. If it's a 12-teamer, you're only going to get 3. If you get that 4th running back, you're probably just sacrificing depth.
Yeah.
So like at wide receiver, which is not ideal. But either way, the point is you kind of know how many running backs you're going to need, and they miss games. So you should just be buying low on the whole entire position at this point, because like you said, I mean, even guys that we haven't talked about, like Miles Sanders could easily be that, one of those guys that gives value. Like, there's everyone there as long as you're getting them, in the 6th, 7th, 8th. Maybe they dropped a few spots in their ADP. We know they're risky. You have to draft some of them. So it's just mitigating the risk at that point. So yeah, like I'm totally with you. It's like I'm banging pass catcher, avoiding quarterback. And then, if I can just run running back in the top 50, I'm fine. That I'm really not doubling up this year because it's just, I don't see the value in it.
Yeah. And so when it comes to wide receiver, it's so deep, and there are a lot of good options later in the draft. But if you don't have, if you're in a league, say, that starts 3 wide receivers, if you don't have 3 wide receivers before, like Elijah Moore, I would say would be the cutoff, wide receiver 35, that range. If you don't have 3 wide receivers before the top 35 are off the board, you're probably in trouble. Just because the wide receiver position is so deep, but it's really hard to get, wide receiver 2s or higher later in the draft. So that's why I try to emphasize having at least 3 wide receivers before the top 35 are off the board. And then you start filling out your bench with these great upside flyers like Drake London, Romeo Dobbs, guys like that. are fantastic to have on your bench, but you need to have a stable top 3 wide receivers ready to go before you kind of get to that point.
Yeah, and I that's why I say kind of 4 in the top 40, because I actually kind of include London more of that. Like, I would start London week 1. Like, I don't really have questions about him, but I'm talking about like wide receiver seems deep, but then you start getting like, it's like you go from like Christian Kirk to like Chase Claypool and Kadarius Toney. Like, they, you know what I mean? Like, it starts getting late early.
Yeah, they're all the same. Like,
wide receiver.
And one of them typically falls later than they should. So that's why it's just important to load up early. So we want those guys to be on our bench to begin the season.
Yeah, exactly. And running backs, like, you just know you're gonna need them. So, but you don't have to like go out and rush it, especially once you have one. I think, you know, if you went crazy wide receiver heavy in the first few rounds, maybe you got a tight end, then I get why a guy like Josh Jacobs or Cam Akers, or, you know, who would be a lot more appealing, because now you're buying low. Like, you can get Mixon production from Jacobs potentially without spending that first round pick. So it's all about just mitigating the risk, maximizing the upside. Again, wide receivers played a median of 16 games last year. Running backs was 14. Tight ends tends to be, I think it was 15 last year, but it tends to be 16 as well, or one missed game a year, as well. But like, these running backs, man, you know, you can't score fantasy points if you're not on the field. So I like to maximize my team's ceiling by hammering pass catchers. All right, that is going to do it for this episode of the Fantasy Flex. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and remember, we have a ton of content out here on the channel. We have a lot of great episodes we've been cranking these out all off season. So if you want to go back and check out, we go into each specific position. We got a lot of great guests. Evan Silva just did a sleeper episode. We had Jake Seeley on. We had Jay Zacharyson. Just a lot of top tier, sharp guys in the industry. So be sure to check out the channel if you're preparing for your drafts. And you can find us on Twitter. Sean is at @the_oddsmaker. I'm at Chris Raybon. We're also at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. And be sure to check out actionnetwork.com for our fantasy rankings, projections, content, all that good stuff. Until next time, let's get this money.